Ellie.
And I'm Rick.
And this is our guide, part 1, to the best super shoes in 2025.
Now, as two people lucky enough to test shoes for a living, one of the things we're asked most is, what are the best super shoes?
Yeah, and it's a fair enough question because most super shoes cost well over £200. So if you're going to spend that amount on a pair of shoes, you want to make sure you're making a good investment.
And not all super shoes are for the same distances or for the same type of runner. So we have got a selection for you here, and hopefully you'll find something that's right for you.
So before we get started, it's probably worth mentioning the type of runner we are because different super shoes are going to suit different types of runners. So I am a neutral runner, I'm a heel striker, and my marathon PB is around 3 hours, 16 minutes.
And I'm also a neutral runner. I think I'm a midfoot striker. I once ran a marathon in 2:58, although it was a while ago, and I've got a 1:22 half marathon. Currently training to run a sub 5 minute mile. Haven't done it yet, but that's the idea. Okay, so our first shoe is a Saucony Endorphin Elite 2, which is actually a truly unique super shoe.
Yeah, so in terms of key stats, you've got 39.5 millimeters of foam in the heel, 31.5 millimeters in the forefoot, giving it an 8 millimeter drop.
I've done quite a lot of running in this shoe, and I say it comes alive at 5k to 10k pace. It's extremely responsive and very bouncy even by super shoe standards. So if you've got a kind of park run PB in mind or a 10k, I would say that the Endorphin Elite 2 is a really good bet. The thing for me I didn't particularly like was I think it's quite unstable laterally, so kind of from side to side, even by super shoe standards. So that would put me off a little bit if I was doing a marathon where there might be some cornering.
Yeah, I would say the midsole is basically made from InvisiRun foam. So this is a brand new foam for Saucony this year. And it is mad, isn't it? Like, it really is so bouncy. But sometimes when you get bouncy foams, you don't necessarily get the energy return from them. They're bouncy, but they're not necessarily propulsive. Whereas I would say this is both of them, but you're not necessarily getting that firmer, stabilizing foam that you would get from other super shoes. So particularly for me as a heel striker, when I sort of land on my heel on this super cushion foam, it is very much compresses. And I think for me, that's why, although this is an amazing shoe, I do struggle with the Endorphin Elite 2, like probably over a half marathon distance. I wouldn't wear it for a marathon just because of the stability element. I mean, even this heel counter,
it's hardly there,
it's
is
so
it?
flexible that I think you really do want very secure ankles and perhaps to be a forefoot, midfoot striker to wear this.
Totally agree. I think this is definitely made for the midfoot or forefoot striker. It doesn't really make sense to shoe when you're heel striking.
Yeah.
I did one sort of slowish long run with it, which isn't actually what it's marketed at, but it felt extremely odd at that pace. One thing I say, it's at the expensive end, even for super shoes, £280. So you need fairly deep pockets to go for the Endorphin Elite 2. But I do think if you've got 5k or 10k in mind, it's right up there with the most responsive shoes that I've tried.
Next up, we have the Nike Alphafly 3. Now, this is the shoe I used for my marathon PB. A personal, perhaps, favourite of mine.
It looks used.
It looks used, yeah. This is a pair that has withstood storm burst.
So that's good. Other runners who've used this are Kelvin Kiptum,
Yeah.
who ran in this shoe to set the current men's marathon record of 2 hours and 35 seconds. So it's got some serious creds, Ali, yourself and Kelvin Kiptum.
Indeed.
So stats-wise, it is 40 millimeters in the heel, which is the legal limit of a shoe. You can't go higher than that and have a race-legal shoe. And it's 32 millimeters in the forefoot, so that's an 8 millimeter heel-to-toe drop.
Yeah, kind of what you would expect, I'd say, from a racing shoe. And I would say the ride of the Alphafly 3 is lightweight, punchy, and just very fun. I mean, it's more aggressive than the version 2. So if anyone's running the version 2, I think you get a slightly more tippy sensation, like you would expect again on a super shoe when you run. But it's not like, if you look at it here, the rocker's not as defined as something that you might see on like the Hoka Cielo X2.
Right.
So sort of like a little bit more conservative, but all in all still like exceptional energy return in this. I would say as well, thing to note about the Alphafly is I think you can be lots of different types of runners to make this shoe work for you.
Yeah.
So again, for me as a heel striker, you can see it's got a nice beveled heel at the back here that protrudes out a little bit. And again, that's to aid stability for people like me. But if you land in the midfoot or the forefoot, I think there's also a lot to love here. Getting that nice poppy toe off as well. So I think this is a shoe that perhaps works well for lots of different people in the sense of maybe being accommodating, but not in the sense of not being fun. Just you don't.
Broader application.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I would also say this shoe is designed with longer distances in mind. So that's marathon. Even a kind of road-based ultra, you might get away with in a shoe like this. If you were just looking for like a 5k, 10k, maybe even a half marathon shoe, then maybe something like the Vaporfly 4 might be a better
Yeah,
option.
I think this is definitely geared. I mean, Nike themselves even said this is definitely geared towards the marathon distance, no doubt about it. And yeah, if you are someone looking for a maybe slightly nimbler ride, potentially, like this isn't clunky, but it's not nimble.
Yeah, okay.
In that same sense, then and you're gearing towards shorter distance, I would maybe go for something a little bit snappier potentially.
Lovely. 2 shoes, this one. This is a 2-shoe approach. This is from Asics. It's a MetaSpeed Sky and MetaSpeed Edge. I actually have to admit I haven't run either of these, but I have run in previous iterations of these shoes, and I'm actually a massive fan.
Yeah, I have ran just an initial test run in both of these shoes, which I'll link my video of these in the description. Where to call out the updates on these? I guess in terms of the stack height, we've got 39.5 millimeters in the heel and 34.5 millimeters in the forefoot. So 5 millimeter drop on these.
Yep.
A little bit of a lower drop shoe. I guess let's talk about this 2-shoe approach that Asics go for, because they have maintained it throughout every iteration, including these ones.
Yeah, so my understanding is the Sky is for what they call stride runners. These are people who get a bit more airborne, they get a longer stride as speed increases. And then you have the Edge for the cadence runners, and that's people who've got like a higher cadence, maybe a little more kind of earthbound as they run. And they market it, those 2 types of runners. It can be difficult, I think, to establish which one you are.
I think it's quite tricky. Like, it almost, there must be a reason for it. I think the original thing was they sent 10 prototypes to lots of different runners, and there were 2 clear prototypes that people preferred. I do think it's really tricky. I think most people aren't going to know if they're a stride or a cadence runner.
Yeah.
The kind of way I look at it, and I think Asics might disagree with this, but I would say maybe the Edge is slightly more geared towards heel strikers, and the Sky is slightly more geared towards midfoot and forefoot strikers, purely because of the way that the foams are constructed in them. So the Edge, so basically what you've got on the latest versions is you've got 2 different foams in the heel. So you've got FF Turbo Plus and you've got FF Leap, which is a brand new foam. So in the different shoes, they're in reverse orders in different ones.
Okay.
So in the Edge, what you've got is the FF Turbo Plus on the bottom and then the FF Leap on the top. So because you've got that slightly more, I guess, hard wearing, slightly firmer foam on the bottom, what that's going to mean for people that land on their heel, particularly in the Edge, is that you've just got a bit more stability.
Okay.
So then when you sort of roll onto your toes,
Yeah.
it's a bit more secure. But I mean, both versions in the latest ones have a much more rounded heel bevel, so heel stability is something that they have addressed.
Yeah, I mean, they look identical, don't they?
Yeah, very hard to tell the
In
difference.
terms of weight, I mean, they're both extremely lightweight. So actually, they're arguably not a massively different shoe, are they?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the foam in the latest version is incredible. I think with these, you are getting an extremely lightweight, one of the most lightweight on the market. I mean, even holding it now, it's like barely weighs anything. Very, like the energy return is incredible on these. I think they're a lot of fun to run in all.
Yeah, I loved the Paris, which is a kind of earlier iteration of this. Thought it was the best super shoe I've tried. Really lightweight, amazingly responsive. The only problem I had, and I'm hoping they fixed it, is that actually I felt it was a little bit shallow in the forefoot, so I got a tiny little bit of pressure on sort of my toes as a result of the nail of the toe.
Yeah, I think they have addressed that in the latest version. Definitely from sort of initial test runs, it does feel like they've increased the volume in the toe box, which is great. And yeah, I think these are going to retail for £220, which I think is really good.
Yeah, agreed.
For a super shoe, I think, you are going to be paying the £200+ mark, but for what is, I think, one of the best super shoes out there, definitely up there with the likes of Nike and Adidas, I think 220 for this is really reasonable.
Looks good too, I think.
Yeah,
stylish.
I do.
Stylish shoe.
Okay, and then our final shoe for our part 1 video is the New Balance FuelCell SuperComp Elite version 5. Now, this has had a pretty big transformation. You can go and watch my video on this compared to the version 4.
Yeah, and I think the version 4 was quite an accommodating, slightly wider shoe that was maybe useful across different speeds and maybe different distances. This is narrower and a little bit more designed with kind of PBs and races in mind. A few stats: 40mm in the heel. Again, that's the legal limit of a shoe. Down to 32mm in the forefoot. So that's an 8mm heel to toe drop.
Yeah, so what New Balance have actually done from the 4 to the 5, they shaved 4mm off the forefoot. So immediately that is going to make the ride totally different. So I would describe it as essentially a much more nimble, snappier super shoe now compared to the 4. I think before, with that all that foam concentrated in the forefoot, you definitely had
Yeah.
sort of, I guess it cushioned your landings a lot more, whereas now you're going to roll through the stride and definitely notice that sense of ground feel and connectedness at the front.
Yeah. It's nice because I think actually New Balance haven't necessarily been part of the super shoe debate in the same way that, say, an Adidas or a Nike have.
Yeah.
So then to have a shoe that actually can compete on that level is...
Yeah, I definitely think it's up there. I think the only contention I have with this shoe is it is £260. And I think when I compare it to the Asics MetaSpeed or the Adidas Adios Pro 4, they're both £220. I would put them above this in terms of the propulsion, the energy return, and they are £40 less. So it's almost like, if this was £220, I think I'd have less of an issue with it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think because it's marketed above that, I would almost expect it to be better, and I don't think it quite is there yet.
Yeah.
But if you are used to New Balance as a brand, then I could see why someone would want to go to this. If you're used to their shoes and you run a lot in the 1080 for your sort of training runs, I could see why transitioning to this would be good.
I think that's it, isn't it? People get kind of wedded to a brand, don't they? They get a sort of sense of what it's like to run in an Asics or New Balance. So often I think you'll naturally just go, okay, I'm a New Balance runner.
Yeah.
Here's my super shoe of choice.
Yeah. And I mean, credentials for this aren't to be knocked. Alex Yee did the London Marathon. Very respectable time in these this year. So they're not propulsive by any means.
Yeah.
They're just, for me, maybe a slight still step behind the best of the best, but still
a good option.
Very good shoe.
Okay, so that's our roundup of the 4 best super shoes, part 1. There's a part 2 coming at this where our colleagues will look at 4 other super shoes. But hopefully you found something in that lineup that sounds like it's going to be right for you as a runner.
Yep, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for part 2.